That is part of a recording that you were never supposed to hear. That is from the Breonna Taylor case, from the grand jury proceedings. As we know, grand jury, secret proceeding, not supposed to be public. I mean, I can't remember ever listening to a recording of a grand jury before, but it has happened in this case, which is unlike any other case, and hours and hours and hours of testimony and evidence released today. Court TV has them. So what exactly is going on here? Well, there's an outcry. Like, why were there no criminal charges against the police officers who shot and killed Breonna Taylor, who's home in her own apartment doing nothing wrong? Like, how did that happen? Well, the Attorney General came out and spoke and talked about, well, there was no evidence that and then like, well, show us. What evidence is there? So after the judge ordered it, the Attorney General released about 15 hours of these proceedings with all the testimony and recordings of radio transmissions like that. And Court TV crime and justice reporter Julia Janae got her hands on it, been working on it all day, going through these recordings. And wow, let's start here, Julia. What is in these recordings, these 15 hours? What's in and what is not contained in those recordings?
Vinny, it's a lot of information, and it's really insightful into what happens in grand jury proceedings. So inside, you do hear the actual testimony, the witnesses who take the stand, who are sworn in, and they are giving their account of what happened to these grand jurors. You can hear everything that's going on in that courtroom or whatever room that they are in for this grand jury process. And you can even hear some of the whispering at the prosecution table back and forth. So they really just turned on this audio recording and let it go. But what you don't hear are any opening statements. You don't hear what the prosecution began with. It really just starts on the testimony of the first witness. And you don't hear anything as a wrap up at the end as far as the recommendations that the prosecution, the Attorney General's office, gave to these grand jurors before they started their deliberations. These grand jurors heard from a lot of secondhand evidence, secondhand accounts of what happened. The officers who interviewed witnesses or officers who interviewed the actual officers who pulled the trigger. Here's an account of a woman who was in the apartment across the way from Breonna Taylor. She could see through her window, the back window of Breonna Taylor's apartment, and she described to the detective, Herman Hall, exactly what she says she noticed in those moments that the bullets first rang out.
As soon as she hit post, she hears a pop and then hears a spray of bullets. Her daughter was downstairs making a sandwich and screamed. The scream was a bloody murder type scream. Excuse me. Dickerson calls 911 and runs downstairs checking to make sure her 11-year-old daughter is okay. Her husband Curtis was asleep, but all three children were awake when the shooting occurred. Her son was in his room. All the bedrooms are upstairs. His son was in his room watching something on his laptop, and her other daughter was in her room watching something on her laptop. The pop noise was a gunshot, and then she heard the spray of gunfire. There wasn't much time between the first gunshot and the spray of gunshots. She's familiar with gunfire because she has a carry and conceal permit and has been exposed to gunfire in the past. On the 911 call, she identifies a second round of gunshots, but believes it could have been the SWAT truck blowing off the parking lot gate.
And Vinny, I have to point out that this interview of that witness took place June 26th. This was 3 months after Breonna Taylor's shooting death. And that was the case for a lot of these interviews because there really wasn't that in-depth investigation until after that outcry.
Now, one of the big issues has been no knock versus knock and announce. What did the grand jurors hear, and what did they learn about the moments before officers entered Breonna's apartment?
They had heard that word, knock and announce, multiple times during those 3 days. They heard that mostly from law enforcement. That question was asked multiple times, not only from the officers who interviewed the officers who went in, but a couple of the ones who were there on the scene. And they all said that they knocked and announced that this was a 2-minute period before they went into Breonna Taylor's home, that they were knocking 6 and 7 times was the number that kept coming up in multiple accounts from law enforcement, where they said they said in one way or the other that they were police officers and then entered into the apartment after no one responded, and they felt like it should have been enough time for someone to come to the door. Here's one of the detectives talking about what happened the moment they breached that door.
Once they quit contacting him, because it was a good, I would say 1 or 2 minutes of me knocking on the door saying police, and I could hear her, somebody inside, I could hear her, and we knew who the target was. We had to believe who the target was, and we were told that it shouldn't be a problem. It was supposed to be her and her kid, maybe her and a small child there, so that's why we decided tonight. It was a no-knock warrant, but we wanted to give time just because we've done this before with kids, and you can hear movement, but there's no answer. So John and I decided, let's go ahead and hit it.
As far as the non-law enforcement witnesses, Vinny, they mostly talked about the gunshots. They did not hear or talk about the knocking, but the interviews with law enforcement, they indicated to these grand jurors that they did talk to one man who said that he heard the police officers announce. Now, the grand jury procedure, right? We never get to see it here on Court TV. I mean, this is the first time we're ever even getting to hear it. But part of it that's different than a regular trial jury is that the back and forth, that grand jurors, from my experience, a lot of times ask questions and it becomes part of the process. What happened here? Were there questions that were captured on this audio? Yes, it was a very relaxed setting, it seemed. They were free to ask questions at the end of testimony, sometimes during testimony. You can hear on the audio grand jurors asking detectives or asking law enforcement witnesses, can you tell me more about that? How did you all know this about the bullets or know this about the gun that was used? And even in one situation, they gave a list of their questions to the prosecution, and the prosecutor gave those to the witness who returned to the stand the next day. Take a listen.
And the third question is why body cams weren't activated. I can't answer that. I don't know why body cams weren't used for that.
Didn't the city say that they didn't use body cams for this type of operation?
I'm sorry?
Didn't the city say they don't use body cams for this type of operation?
I don't know. I mean, if the city said that, I don't know it. I believe they've changed their policy since this incident.
I mean, when this happened, they weren't.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the city said. As far as body cams go, I do know that there are no body cams of that entry. The fourth question is, what was the formal plan, assignments for serving warrant? I'm not sure I can, as indicated by Cosgrove in the 9/18 interview.
Was there a formal plan between the 7 officers as they made approach to serving the warrant?
I'm not aware of one.
We were limited in what we could see as far as the evidence, because we're hearing about these exhibits, and later there was a whiteboard that was brought into evidence that the detective said, yes, this is our plan before this warrant was executed. So that was one of the limitations, and we didn't hear about the recommendations. So we didn't hear if jurors had questions about what charges they could recommend.
Yeah, that's the real issue here, right? No, you don't hear what, I mean, the Attorney General admitted, though, that he said, listen, I didn't recommend any homicide charges here because I didn't feel there was the evidence. And apparently, under Kentucky rules, they have to record the testimony. That's what the rule says. But they did not record any of the recommendations or deliberations. So, Julie, today, 15 hours worth of stuff. So I know we're going to be working on this next week as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vinny.
When we come back, we're going to play the interview for you with Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, the one who fired the weapon. Well, he was interviewed. That interview was played in front of that grand jury. We're going to play it for you next. Tonight we're taking you inside a place where Court TV has never gone before. Inside the grand jury. Unbelievable. This is the Breonna Taylor case, and her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, the one who fired the weapon, was interviewed. That interview was played for the grand jurors. Now it will be played for you.
Filling maybe some confusion that I've had. So these like loud bangs in the door, and people are yelling, who is it? Who is it? That kind of thing. How many, about how many loud bangs there was?
So first it was boom, 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 boom. Like, what's that? So now we can not put no clothes.
Yeah, y'all are dead.
Yeah, so we not put no clothes.
Naked, pretty much.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we get up, all right, I'll probably get my pants on. She probably gets some pants on, and it's another now. Like, dun, 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 dun. She's like, who is it?
Right.
Like, loud. It's
Still in the bedroom.
Still in the bedroom. Because we're trying to get decent to go into the door.
Right.
Whatever it may be.
Is the bedroom that first bedroom on the left down the hallway, or is it on the right? I didn't make it all the way down there.
It's all straight back.
Straight back.
Come in the door.
Right.
You just keep on walking straight and you're gonna end up
Okay.
it's all the way down the hallway.
Sorry to interrupt you, go ahead.
So after that second loud bang, where she's still yelling, who is it? Like I said, I grabbed the gun.
Sure.
So now we got enough clothes on. I still didn't make it even put shoes on or anything. I don't have anything. So,
Yeah, no, I said it, yeah.
so after I grabbed that, we start walking towards the door to go see who it is. Another loud bang. Well, not really, I don't even know if it's another loud bang, but the door is coming in. When we got to the doorway to go see who it is, the door is coming in.
The doorway, like, inflect, like, down.
No, we never made it past the room.
The bedroom doorway.
We never made it past the second bedroom in the home. That's on the left. There's a bathroom that's on the right if you're coming from the room. We never even made it like mid hallway.
Okay. So you never made it past the bathroom?
No, if you saw where her body was at, and I saw before I went, there was holes in the back wall, like of the hallway, so you can see exactly where we were at, like coming to the door.
Right.
But as we're coming to the door like comes off the hinges.
Okay.
Like you can't see anybody though. Like when the door comes off the hinges, it's happening fast, like it's like an explosion.
Sure.
So boom, one shot. Then all of a sudden there's a whole lot of shots. We both dropped to the ground. But I just hear her screaming.
Did you shoot towards the door, or just like up in the air, or
like towards the ground, really just like warning shots. So if it was somebody that run off or something, you know what I'm saying? Just like somebody's at this point, somebody's breaking in the home. Like we don't.
Did you see anything in the door come off the hinges? Did you see anything at that point?
No, I couldn't see anybody. It was dark. There was no lights out there. So all we hearing is these loud booms, and we're saying who is it? Nobody's saying who it is, but then the door gets kicked in.
where were you at? Where was she at? Where were you at when that shot was fired?
So say she was right here,
Right.
and I was right here.
Is this the other bedroom door?
This is the other bedroom
This is the
door right here.
bathroom.
This will be the bathroom, and she's standing right here.
And you're all standing
We
in the
just
back.
came out. She really came out first, but she was kind of like next to me, so I come out. And then the door gets kicked in, so I'm right here to the other room. She's right here, so it was one shot, boom. Then the door was flying open. There was a whole lot of shots, so we both dropped.
Right.
But when I dropped, I'm right here closer to this room. She's dead in the middle of the hallway. So any shots coming in don't have any choice to go right there.
So are you right-handed?
Yes.
You shot with your right hand?
Yeah.
So did you shoot before the door flew open?
Yeah. Well, it was all in like one motion. As it flew open, like boom, boom. Like it was like simultaneous.
It was kind of like that, like a boom.
Yeah, not really. I feel like I aimed down.
Aimed down a little bit.
Yeah, like, because I went course, I don't need to kill anybody if, you know, if I can just get you out here just by you hearing me. So,
Did you hear anything, any other words? I mean, was anything being said at all when the doors were open, or
No.
did you hear anything?
no, just the door coming open, and at that point, they're shooting and she's screaming. And I'm on the ground, my feet are kind of into the other room at this point. So when the shots are going off, I'm scooting, like, you know, and like I said, so when I let off the shot, and I dropped to the ground, the gun dropped like right here, and that's on the ground, I kicked it like that with my foot.
Into that other bedroom,
Yes.
underneath that bed
Yes.
there? Okay.
Yes.
Is that her sister's room?
That's her sister's room.
Okay.
But she's not here right now, she's in California, so thank God she wasn't here.
At what point did you call the police?
When the door was open and she was on the ground, like beating, so now I'm right there with her, and like I can hear like a whole lot of chatter and stuff outside, but I'm hysterical, like at this point, like I'm yelling at somebody to come help her or whatever, and then after it's been like 5 minutes, like